Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain poured heavily over the city skyline when Adrian Cole stepped out of the black SUV. The storm mirrored the chaos inside him. Reporters still whispered about the car crash that nearly killed him 2 years ago, and about the mysterious woman who had donated blood to save his life. He had searched for her in vain, until fate crossed their paths again in the most unexpected way. Under the fluorescent lights of St. Matthew's Hospital, he stood across from Dr. Elara Hayes, the woman whose steady hands had once pulled him back from the edge of death. Her white coat was stained with coffee and exhaustion, but her eyes carried the same calm light he remembered from the night of his accident. "Why are you really here, Mr. Cole?" she asked, folding her arms. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Because you saved me once," he said. "And now I need your help again." He slid a sleek envelope across her desk. She frowned, opening it to reveal a contract. The first line read "Temporary Marriage Agreement." She looked up, disbelief widening her eyes. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Adrian shook his head slowly. "No joke. My company's board will block the hospital project unless I prove I am settled, stable, and personally invested. You're the only person I trust enough to stand beside me." Elara let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "You trust me? You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said quietly. "I know that when I was dying, you stayed past your shift, and you did not care that I was the man whose company once cut funding to your clinic." Her fingers froze on the contract. "So you remember that," she whispered. "Every second of it." His voice was low, heavy. "You could have let me die. Instead, you saved the man responsible for your hardship." The air between them thickened, heavy with unspoken history. She glanced down again at the contract. "And you think a fake marriage will fix what your company did to people like me?" Adrian met her gaze. "No. But it might save the hospital that will keep hundreds alive. Think of it as repayment. A partnership with a purpose." She stared at him for a long moment, torn between anger and disbelief. "You are serious." "Completely." He reached for a pen. 6 months. Public appearances only. You set the boundaries. You name the hospital's charity wing. I will fund it in full." Elara's pulse quickened. Her brother's small-town clinic was days away from shutting down. She needed money, leverage, time, none of which she had. Adrian's offer was insane. Immoral, even. But behind his stoic facade, she saw something unexpected: remorse. "You do realize this could destroy both our reputations," she said. "Then let it," Adrian replied. "I have faced worse storms than bad press." Thunder cracked outside, shaking the window. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elara took the pen, her hand trembling slightly, and signed her name under his. The sound of the pen scraping the paper felt final, fateful. "So," she murmured, "what now, Mr. Cole?" He met her eyes and said, "Now, Mrs. Cole, we begin the act that might just heal us both." The camera of fate had started rolling. What began as a business arrangement was about to become the most unpredictable story of their lives. The morning after signing the contract, Elara woke up to the sound of rain still tapping against her apartment window. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind like a dream she could not fully believe. Marriage. 6 months. To a man whose company had nearly destroyed her clinic. She sat up and pressed her palms to her face. What had she just agreed to? Her phone buzzed. A new message from Adrian Cole. "Car will pick you up at 8. We have a press briefing at Cole Industries." Dress formally. I will handle the rest. His tone through the screen was as cold and precise as she remembered from every business headline he ever appeared in. By 8:30, she stood before the glass tower that bore his name. Reporters were already gathering outside. Cameras flashed when the car door opened. Adrian stepped out first, impeccably dressed in charcoal gray, his tie perfectly aligned. He extended a hand toward her. For a moment, she hesitated, then placed her hand in his. The world's noise seemed to explode. Questions fired from every direction. Mr. Cole, who is she? Are you confirming the rumors? Is this your fiancé? Adrian's arm tightened protectively around her shoulders. He spoke calmly into the microphones. Yes. This is Dr. Elara Hayes. My wife. The word struck her like a small thunderclap. Wife. She forced a polite smile while her heart thudded violently. Inside the building, the chaos faded into silence. The elevator doors closed, and Elara exhaled sharply. You did not tell me it would be public this fast, she said. Adrian adjusted his cufflinks. The board meets tomorrow. They had to see stability before they saw the plan. And if I had refused? You did not, he said simply. The elevator opened to the executive floor. The office smelled of coffee, glass, and power. A digital screen displayed the model of the new hospital, the Cole Medical Center for Community Health. It was beautiful. It was everything her old clinic could never be. Is this real? She asked softly. It will be, he replied. You will be listed as Chief Medical Advisor. Your name will give it credibility. My money will build it. Elara turned to him. You make it sound like a transaction. Because it is, Adrian said. At least for now. He walked toward the window, rain streaking the glass behind him. When I was in that accident, I kept hearing the monitors beep. The doctor said someone refused to leave my side that night. I did not know it was you until months later. You did not ask for anything. You simply did your job. That is why I trust you with this. His voice softened at the edges. She looked at him, searching for the ruthless executive from the tabloids, but found something fractured instead. The storm outside blurred the skyline, and for a moment, silence stretched between them. Later that afternoon, they met with Adrian's assistant, a brisk woman named Clara. She handed Elara a detailed schedule: charity dinners, photo ops, hospital site visits. We will need you fitted for a formal wardrobe, Clara said, already typing notes. The media will expect consistency. Mrs. Cole must look the part. Elara almost choked on the title. Mrs. Cole, she repeated under her breath. The sound felt foreign. At the fitting room that evening, she stood before the mirror as the stylist pinned a midnight blue dress around her. Adrian entered quietly, pausing at the sight of her reflection. For a heartbeat, the air shifted. She turned slightly. Is this necessary? She asked. Unfortunately, yes. Perception drives funding. And what do you see when you look at me? He met her eyes through the mirror. A woman who does not belong in any of this, and that is exactly why people will believe us. His answer startled her. It was not cruel. It was honest. The stylist cleared her throat awkwardly, breaking the moment. Hours later, when the city lights flickered across the windows of her apartment, Elara sat alone, still wearing the ring he had given her. It was simple, unadorned, yet heavier than gold. She traced its edge and whispered to the empty room, "What have I done?" Across town, Adrian stood in his penthouse, watching the rain wash over the city that owed him everything and nothing at all. He poured a glass of whiskey, his reflection staring back from the window. 6 months, he murmured to himself. I can survive 6 months. But the flicker of doubt in his eyes suggested that even he was no longer sure. The game had begun, and neither of them knew how real it would become. 2 weeks later, the illusion of a perfect marriage had already become a daily performance. Elara learned to smile for cameras, to stand beside Adrian at every board meeting and gala, and to answer polite questions with even politer lies. Yes, we met during one of the Foundation's medical missions. Oh, it was love at first sight, she would say, though every word tasted like glass. At night, when the photographers disappeared, she returned to her apartment instead of his penthouse, and silence filled the space like cold air. Yet, something in their arrangement began to shift. Adrian was no longer the untouchable billionaire who treated emotions as liabilities. He was quieter, sometimes distracted. One evening, as they reviewed hospital blueprints in his office, he pressed his fingers to his temple. "Are you all right?" she asked. He shook his head. "Old injury. It happens when I work too long." Without thinking, she moved closer and adjusted the light away from his eyes. "You need to rest, Mr. Cole," she said softly. "You can call me Adrian when no one is watching," he replied. The words hung between them, heavier than the city rain outside. She smiled faintly, unsure whether it was permission or a test. The following week, they attended a high-profile fundraising dinner. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and ambition. Business magnates, politicians, and reporters mingled in their designer armor. Elara, in a white gown that Clara had chosen, felt out of place among them. As Adrian guided her through the crowd, whispers followed. "That is the doctor wife. He must be using her for PR." Adrian heard it too. His jaw tensed, but his hand on her back remained steady. When they reached the podium, the host introduced them as the power couple behind the upcoming Cole Medical Center. Adrian's speech was sharp, calculated, but when he spoke of her, his tone softened unexpectedly. "Dr. Hayes has reminded me that healthcare is not a business. It is a responsibility. This project is not mine alone, it belongs to everyone who still believes compassion can build miracles." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed again, but this time not out of gossip, out of awe. Elara looked at him, speechless. For the first time, he had spoken like a man, not a brand. Later, as they danced for the press, she whispered, "Why did you say that?" Adrian met her gaze. "Because I meant it." After the event, in the car ride home, rain streaked the tinted windows. He loosened his tie, exhaustion softening his features. "You were incredible tonight," he said quietly. "You spoke like someone who has been saving people all her life," she replied. A small smile appeared on his face. "Maybe you are saving me too." She looked away quickly, pretending to watch the raindrops race down the glass. Her heart betrayed her by beating faster. Over the next few days, their partnership grew strangely natural. They met with architects, visited the construction site, and shared quiet lunches in between long hours of planning. Sometimes, when she laughed, he found himself listening instead of thinking about profit margins. And sometimes, when he worked late, she left coffee on his desk without a word. The walls between them began to crack, though neither dared to admit it. Then came the morning that changed everything. Adrian arrived at her clinic unannounced, wearing a rare smile. "Pack your things," he said. "We are flying to Boston for the medical conference. The board wants to see us together." She hesitated. "You mean as a real couple?" "Exactly as they believe us to be." On the flight, the tension was electric but unspoken. When turbulence hit, she gripped the armrest, eyes shut tight. Adrian covered her hand with his. "It is all right," he murmured. "I have you." His touch was steady, grounding. For a man who once measured life in numbers and mergers, he suddenly understood the pulse of something far more fragile. That night, after the conference, they stood on the hotel balcony overlooking the glowing city. The wind carried the scent of rain and possibility. Adrian turned toward her. "Do you ever think this arrangement feels too real?" She met his eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every day." He looked down, almost smiling, and for the first time since the crash, the man who built empires felt entirely human. Neither of them said another word, but the silence between them was no longer cold. It was warm, alive, and dangerously close to love. By the third month, the contract no longer felt like paper between them. It felt like gravity, quiet but unbreakable. Every morning, Adrian drove Elara to the construction site where steel frames rose against the sky, a monument to both his power and her faith. Workers paused when they passed, whispering about the doctor and the CEO who looked almost like a real couple. Elara's laughter softened the edges of the gray world Adrian had built around himself. At times, he caught himself watching her too long, memorizing how the wind played with her hair or how she spoke to people by name, never title. He envied that kind of kindness. One afternoon, as they walked through the nearly finished pediatric wing, she touched a white wall still smelling of paint. "You are really doing this," she said quietly. "You are building something that will outlive you." He looked at her, the weight of truth in his voice. "No, we are doing this." Their eyes met for a moment too long. Then the moment broke when Clara appeared at the doorway, holding a folder. "Sir, the board has scheduled an early audit. They are asking questions about the funding allocation and your personal life." Adrian's expression darkened. "Meaning?" "Meaning they think the marriage is a publicity move. Someone is leaking internal files." That evening, tension shadowed every word they spoke. In his office, Adrian stood behind his desk, staring at spreadsheets that suddenly looked like weapons. "If they believe the marriage is fake, they can freeze the hospital funds," he said. "Then let them come see how real it is," Elara replied, surprising even herself. "You said we are doing this together. Prove it." Her defiance sparked something in him. He stepped closer. "Careful, Dr. Hayes. You are starting to sound like a partner, not an employee." "Then treat me like one," she said, her voice steady. The silence that followed was sharp but alive. The next day, they faced the board together. A dozen suits watched from behind polished oak tables. Adrian began with numbers, progress reports, and legal clauses, but when one director asked, "Are you truly married, Mr. Cole, or is this another investment?" Elara stood before Adrian could answer. "I did not marry him for love," she said clearly. "I married him for something rarer. I married him for hope." The room went still. She continued, her voice calm but certain. "When I met Adrian Cole, he was a man trying to fix the world with money. Now, he is building something that saves lives. You may call it business, but I call it redemption." The chairman leaned back, watching Adrian's reaction. He could have denied it. Instead, he simply reached for her hand. "She is right," he said. "This marriage began as a deal. But somewhere along the way, she reminded me why I wanted to live after that accident. Because people like her still exist." No one spoke. The meeting ended not with applause but with a quiet respect that was louder than any approval stamp. Outside the boardroom, Elara released a shaky breath. "You did not have to say that," she murmured. "Yes, I did," he answered. Because every word was true. Later that night, they returned to his penthouse for the first time since the contract began. The city lights spilled through the tall windows, painting soft reflections across the marble floor. Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine. "To surviving the board," he said. She smiled, lifting her glass. "To surviving each other." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes only when fear loosens its hold. But beneath the warmth, something deeper brewed. The line between pretend and real had faded completely, and neither wanted to draw it back. As she prepared to leave, he stopped her at the door. "Elara," he said quietly, "if we had met differently, without the contract, without the pressurito, you think you could have loved me?" She looked at him, her heart pounding. "I think I already do," she whispered, then walked away before he could answer. Adrian stood there for a long time, her words echoing through the silence. Somewhere beyond the glass, lightning flashed, illuminating the city he once ruled with numbers but now began to see through her eyes. The hospital was nearly complete, but his own healing had only just begun. The next morning, the city woke under a pale dawn. Adrian arrived at the hospital site earlier than usual, wearing no suit, just a simple white shirt rolled at the sleeves. He walked among the workers, checking progress, but his mind was not on blueprints or budgets. It was on her words from the night before. "I think I already do." They had been soft, uncertain, but they had changed everything. When Elara arrived a few hours later, carrying coffee and a stack of medical reports, she found him standing in front of the children's ward. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. "Good morning, Dr. Hayes," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Morning, Mr. Cole," she replied with a small smile. "You look different today." "Maybe I am," he said. Before either could say more, Clara hurried toward them, her face tight. "We have a problem," she whispered. "The CFO leaked the internal documents. The media knows about the contract. They are calling it a staged marriage for publicity." Elara's hands went cold. Adrian's jaw tightened. "How bad?" "It is everywhere," Clara said. "They have photographs, timelines, even the contract summary." By noon, the story had exploded online. News anchors questioned their integrity. Comment sections burned with accusations. Paparazzi crowded outside the construction site. Elara could barely step outside without cameras flashing. "This will destroy the hospital," she said, her voice shaking. "They will shut everything down before it opens." Adrian stood at the window of his office, staring out at the chaos below. "Let them talk," he said. "The truth will speak louder." But his eyes betrayed the exhaustion of a man fighting ghosts he could not control. That evening, they faced a press conference. Reporters shouted questions before they even sat down. "Mr. Cole, was the marriage real? Dr. Hayes, were you paid to play his wife?" The flashes blinded them, but Elara could feel Adrian's hand trembling beside her. He began to speak, but she stopped him. "Let me," she whispered. She rose from her seat and faced the crowd. Her voice carried through the microphones, steady despite the fear. "I am not a liar," she said. "Yes, our marriage began as an arrangement, but what you see now is not an act. This hospital, this partnership, was never about image. It was about saving lives. And in the process, it saved us too." The room fell silent. Every camera pointed at her, every light fixed on her face. Then Adrian stood, moving beside her. "You want the truth," he said, his voice echoing. "I fell in love with the woman who saved my life twice, once in a hospital room, and once from the man I used to be. If that is a scandal, then so be it." The audience erupted, not in mockery but in disbelief, then applause. By the next morning, headlines shifted. The narrative had changed from deception to redemption. Donations flooded in. The hospital fund doubled overnight. The same reporters who doubted them now called it a modern miracle. Yet behind the celebration, Elara felt the fragility of what they had built. The contract was still set to expire in 2 weeks. When she reminded him, Adrian said quietly, "Then we will end the contract properly. No lies, no signatures. Just truth." On the final day of the agreement, he took her to the hospital's rooftop, where the city stretched endlessly beneath the twilight sky. The building glowed with new lights. "It is finished," she whispered. "Not yet," he said, holding a small box in his hand. She froze as he knelt, the wind lifting his words. "I built this hospital to repay the woman who saved me. But what I did not realize is that I was building it for us. Not as payment, but as a promise. Elara Hayes, will you stay with me, this time for real?" Her eyes filled with tears. The city lights flickered below as she whispered yes. He slipped the same simple ring back onto her finger. "No contracts," he said. "Only vows." The noise of traffic, the hum of life, and the faint sound of children laughing from the ward below surrounded them like music. In that moment, two people who had started with a lie found the most honest truth: love built not from convenience, but from compassion. And as the night embraced the city, Adrian Cole finally smiled, knowing that for the first time in years, his heart and the hospital were both complete. The weeks that followed their rooftop promise felt like a calm after a long storm. The hospital finally opened, its glass walls gleaming under the morning sun. Reporters called it a triumph, the symbol of new beginnings for the city. Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint, disinfectant, and hope. Children filled the pediatric ward that Elara had designed, and Adrian stood beside her during the ribbon-cutting ceremony, his hand brushing hers, steady and sure. When the applause echoed through the lobby, he whispered, "You did this." She turned to him and smiled. "No, Adrian. We did." For the first time, the world saw not a scandal, not a contract, but a partnership built on purpose. Their story spread beyond business headlines. News outlets spoke about second chances, compassion, and love reborn from honesty. Still, even in that calm, shadows lingered. The CFO who had leaked their private documents, Thomas Greer, had vanished after being fired, leaving behind whispers of stolen funds. Adrian suspected the hospital's financial accounts had been tampered with. He spent nights reviewing files, eyes strained and sleepless, until Elara found him one evening at his desk. "You cannot fix everything alone," she said gently. "I have to," he replied. "This place carries my name." She placed her hand over his. "Then let me help carry it." Her words grounded him more than any board meeting ever had. Together, they dug through reports until they discovered the missing money had been rerouted to an offshore account, evidence of Thomas's corruption. Adrian immediately contacted the authorities. Within days, Thomas was arrested, and the case became public. Instead of ruining them, it proved their integrity. The hospital's reputation soared higher than ever. But to Adrian, none of that mattered compared to the quiet evenings when Elara sat with him in his office, sipping tea while he worked. Their silences had turned warm, filled with trust instead of tension. One night, he looked up from his laptop and said, "You once told me that healing is not about fixing what is broken, but about helping it grow stronger. I finally understand what you meant." She smiled softly. "You did not just build a hospital, Adrian. You built a heart." Their love deepened with every shared victory and every small act of care. Yet, fame brought new attention, and with it, new tests. Invitations poured in for interviews, charity events, and sponsorships. Some called them the power couple of compassion, a title Adrian found both amusing and strange. He had spent years chasing power for himself, but now, every success meant nothing unless she was part of it. One afternoon, while visiting the hospital garden, they found a young boy sketching flowers on a bench. Elara knelt beside him. "That is beautiful. What is your name?" "Eli," the boy said shyly. "My mom says I can draw here because it makes her happy." Adrian watched quietly as Elara smiled at the child, offering encouragement. The scene reminded him of the woman who had once stayed beside his hospital bed, the woman who saved him without expecting anything in return. That night, he came to her office holding a framed drawing. It was Eli's picture, two people standing beneath a hospital sign, one with brown hair, the other with dark. At the bottom, the boy had written, "Thank you for building this place." Adrian placed it on her desk. "A reminder," he said, "of why we began." Her eyes softened. "You kept your promise, Adrian Cole." He shook his head. "No. You helped me become the kind of man who could keep it." Weeks later, the hospital received national recognition for its innovation in community care. At the award ceremony, Adrian took the stage, but instead of talking about business metrics, he spoke from the heart. This hospital began with a contract, but it stands today because of something far stronger: love disguised as duty, and duty that became love. Dr. Elara Hayes, you taught me that true healing is not measured in profits, but in people. This is your legacy as much as mine. As he finished, the audience rose in applause, and Elara's eyes glistened with tears. When he stepped down, he whispered, "Shall we go home, Mrs. Cole?" She nodded, her hand sliding into his. For once, there were no cameras, no contracts, no boardrooms, just two people who had rewritten what love and redemption could mean. Outside, the night wind carried the faint echo of laughter from the hospital courtyard, and Adrian thought to himself, maybe this was what it felt like to finally be healed. Several months later, the Cole Medical Center had become a symbol of compassion across the country. Adrian and Elara's days were filled with meetings, patient rounds, and new partnerships, yet beneath the calm rhythm of their lives, something deeper grew between them. Their marriage, once born from necessity, had turned into quiet devotion. Every morning, Adrian waited for her outside the staff wing, handing her coffee with a smirk that only she understood. Every night, she stayed by his side as he reviewed reports, her presence softening the edges of his long days. But peace rarely lasts forever. One autumn evening, while Adrian prepared for an out-of-town investor summit, Clara entered his office, her face pale. "Adrian, you need to see this," she said, handing him a folder. Inside were leaked photographs, images of Elara with one of the hospital's lead surgeons, taken out of context, edited to look intimate. The tabloids had already picked them up, twisting the story into betrayal. Adrian's chest tightened. "Who released this?" he demanded. Clara hesitated. "We are tracing it, but my guess is Thomas Greer had allies left in the press. They want to discredit both of you." Hours later, the scandal spread like wildfire. Reporters camped outside their home. Headlines screamed accusations of infidelity. For the first time in months, the fortress of trust they had built began to tremble. That night, Elara found him sitting alone in the darkened living room. "You saw it," she said quietly. He did not answer. His eyes were fixed on the city lights beyond the window. "Adrian, it is not true," she continued. "I was discussing a medical grant with Dr. Lane. The photos are manipulated." He finally looked at her, the pain raw in his voice. "I want to believe you. God, I do. But the board, the media, they will not care about the truth." "Then let them talk," she said firmly, echoing his own words from months ago. "We know what is real." He stood, stepping closer. "Do we?" The question cut through her like glass. She did not answer. Instead, she placed her wedding ring on the table and whispered, "If you have to doubt me, then we are still living in a contract." With that, she walked out, her footsteps fading into the night. The following days felt hollow. Adrian went through the motions at work, his heart heavier with every headline. The hospital staff avoided his eyes, and the board urged him to make a public statement. But he refused. Instead, he began his own investigation. Weeks later, evidence emerged proving that the photos had been fabricated by a PR firm secretly funded by Thomas's old associates. Adrian called a press conference, presenting the truth himself. Cameras flashed as he spoke clearly, his voice steady. "The woman you see in these photographs is my wife, Dr. Elara Cole, and the only truth here is that she has stood beside me with integrity from the beginning. I failed to defend her sooner, and for that, I take full responsibility." The reporters went silent. That night, when he returned home, the house was dark except for one light in the kitchen. Elara was there, her eyes tired but kind. He walked toward her, no words, just the sound of his heart pounding. "You fought for me," she said softly. "I should have done it sooner," he replied. "I am sorry I doubted you." She reached for his hand. "Then stop saying sorry and start believing." And for the first time in weeks, he did. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping gently against the glass just as it had the night they first met. This time, neither of them turned away. Winter came early that year, blanketing the city in a quiet silver calm. Inside the hospital, garlands hung from the lobby ceiling and lights shimmered across the glass walls. The chaos of the scandal had finally faded, but its shadow still lingered around Adrian's heart. He and Elara were together again, yet something between them had changed. There was tenderness, but also hesitation as if both feared losing the fragile piece they had rebuilt. One evening, as snow drifted softly outside, Adrian invited her to the rooftop terrace overlooking the city. It was the same place where he had once asked her to marry him under false terms. Now, the air between them was real and unguarded. "Do you ever think about how all of this started?" he asked quietly. Elara smiled faintly. "Every day. A contract. A lie. And somehow, it led us here." He nodded. "I used to think control was power. That love was weakness. But when I almost lost you, I realized that letting go is the only way to keep what matters." She looked at him, eyes shining under the soft snowlight. "Then do not let go now." Adrian reached into his coat and handed her an envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "The original contract," he said. "Our agreement, the one that began it all. I kept it locked away. But I think it is time we destroy it." She opened the envelope, her fingers brushing the paper that had once defined them. "Are you sure?" "Completely," he said. "No deals, no conditions, no expiration dates. Only truth." Together, they stepped toward the outdoor heater, and the flames flickered in the cold air. Elara hesitated for a moment, then dropped the papers into the fire. The pages curled, turning black and then to ash. Adrian watched the smoke rise into the night sky. "There goes every lie I ever told myself," he murmured. "And every fear I used to hide behind," she replied. For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the embers fade. Then Adrian turned to her. "Elara," he said softly, "I want to make this official, not for the cameras, not for the board, but for us. I want to marry you again. For real, this time." Her breath caught, tears welling in her eyes. "You already have my yes," she whispered. The next week, they held a small ceremony in the hospital garden, surrounded by staff, patients, and friends. There were no media crews, no luxury gowns, no staged photos, only laughter, light, and the simple joy of being seen. When Adrian slipped a new ring onto her finger, he said, "This one is not a symbol of debt or duty. It is a promise that every day with you will be honest." Elara smiled through tears. "Then I promise the same. No more pretending, no more walls." As the guests cheered, snowflakes began to fall again, dusting their hair and shoulders like blessings. Later that night, after everyone had left, they walked hand in hand through the quiet hospital halls. The lights were dim, but warm. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. He listened, the faint laughter of nurses, the soft hum of life returning. "It is the sound of healing," he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "For the hospital," she murmured, "and for us." He kissed her forehead gently, "For us most of all." Outside, the snow kept falling, and for the first time, Adrian Cole felt no need to rebuild, prove, or control anything. He had already found everything worth keeping in her. 1 year later, the Cole Medical Center stood brighter than ever. The garden that had once been bare now bloomed with wildflowers and laughter. The hospital's foundation had expanded, opening branches in 3 neighboring cities, each dedicated to community health and care for those who could not afford treatment. Adrian and Elara became the heart of it all, not as a power couple or a headline, but as partners in both purpose and love. Every morning, he walked her to the main lobby, greeting staff by name, while she stopped to talk with patients, her compassion as steady as the day he first met her. Their love had settled into something peaceful, the kind that did not need to prove itself. On the anniversary of the hospital's opening, a ceremony was held in the new auditorium. Journalists were invited again, but this time, the focus was not on their marriage, it was on the lives that had been changed. A small girl, no older than 8, handed Elara a handmade card covered in colorful crayon hearts. It read, "Thank you for giving my brother a chance to live." Elara knelt down, smiling through tears, while Adrian watched from the side, pride softening his usually composed expression. When she looked up, their eyes met across the crowd, and for a brief moment, the world around them faded away. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, they stood on the rooftop once more. The city lights shimmered below, reflecting in the windows of the hospital they had built together. "Do you ever think about how far we have come?" Elara asked quietly. Adrian slipped his arm around her shoulders. "Every single day. You turned my redemption into purpose. You turned my debt into love." She smiled and leaned closer. "And you turned my struggle into hope." He looked out at the horizon, his voice warm. "You once told me that healing is not about fixing what is broken. It is about believing that something good can grow again." You were right. The wind carried the faint sound of church bells from the distance. Down in the courtyard, the staff had begun lighting lanterns, one for every patient who had recovered that year. The lights floated upward, hundreds of small flames rising into the night sky. Adrian and Elara watched them drift higher and higher, their hands intertwined. "Do you think they can see us from up there?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Maybe. And maybe they will know that this," he gestured toward the glowing hospital below, "was built not by a millionaire, not by a doctor, but by two people who refused to stop believing in kindness." Elara rested her head on his chest. "Then let us keep building." "Always," he said, kissing her hair. The final lantern passed above them, glowing like a star against the winter night. For a long time, they simply stood there, breathing in the peace they had earned. Somewhere inside the hospital, a monitor beeped softly, the same sound that had once connected them in the beginning. It was no longer a reminder of pain, but of life continuing. And as the light of dawn touched the skyline, Adrian Cole knew that his greatest legacy was not the hospital, nor the wealth he once chased. It was her, the woman who saved his life, taught him to love, and helped him finally heal.